Greetings, this is Mpoki Thompson and you're watching Mwananchi Digital. Today I have the presence of the World Bank Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships, Mari Pangestu. Mari.
Hello Mpoki.
Welcome to Tanzania.
Thank you.
How has it been so far?
Very good.
So you've gotten to meet the government but also some people in the private sector. Now, today the focus is going to be on the role of the World Bank vis-a-vis its support to Tanzania in areas of COVID-19 recovery, but also climate change and everything that comes with it. But first and foremost, I would like us to focus on something that's a bit of a novel development in Africa, and that's digital development. Now, we understand that Africa as a continent right now, many countries are trying to tap into that digital development when it comes to digital economy and also other spheres. So can you tell us a bit about how a digital world, digital involvement can help Africa grow in terms of economic inclusivity, but also just help the entire continent in terms of development?
Well, I think we have seen that we call it digital dividend, that in other countries digital technology can have a huge impact on development in many respects. Once you can have the right level of connectivity, because if you don't have the connectivity, then the development dividend doesn't get delivered, because then it's only confined to those who are connected. What you want is to have an inclusive connectivity where it goes to as many people as possible, including women. So you can use digital connectivity to deliver government services, social assistance, as well as any kind of assistance like training or education. So that's at one level something that you can deliver through digital technology. And it also makes things more efficient, more transparent, and more effective.
So you met recently, I believe that was yesterday, with the Tanzanian youth involved in the digital space. So what are some of the things that you have gotten to learn about what they're doing here in Tanzania in as far as digital technology is concerned?
Well, I saw that many of them were trying to develop using technology in many sectors, in environment sector, in advocacy, in agriculture, in education. And I think they said that the connectivity is one issue, because like the one person who was doing, I think his name is Given, he was doing education, but he said because of the connectivity issue, he can only use the very simple way of connectivity, which is using the SMS with the phone, whereas in other countries you could think about online learning, for instance. So one issue is the connectivity. Second is their ability to scale up, right? They all said very difficult to get finance and capital. We talked to, I've forgotten his name now, but he's the head of the startup association, and so he shared how difficult it is to start a business and get capital here. So I think these are some of the constraints for being able to scale up many of the good ideas. It's not enough to have a good idea. The good idea has to be made into a business proposal. So they also all said the same thing, that you need to be able to make the idea become a business, make it business and commercial viability as a business and a commercial venture. And they all said that that's not easy to do, because to become a business model that will work, you need scale. and that is often something they felt they have not been able to do. So I think I do think that there is an opportunity here for digital economy to grow, and what we need to do is think about the ecosystem that must exist, which is really about has to be the skills, the connectivity, first of all, affordable, effective connectivity. That's the kind of the physical infrastructure, and then the digital literacy, both from the people that are creating it and also for the customer, the user, right? And then there's the ability to get access to capital and access to opportunities to scale up. And opportunities to scale up usually comes either from, could be from government, like government application in medical delivery or for education delivery. Those can be opportunities for scale up actually. And then for businesses themselves, once they start digitizing, you start creating a market, and that's the only way you can scale up. So there has to be both sides of the equation, if you like, the supply and the demand. Yeah.
Okay, just a little bit more on that. We recently met with an entrepreneur who has started an online business, but then one of the challenges that he's facing currently in Tanzania in terms of operation is that the government lacks policies to regulate his business. So it's a virtual business, he doesn't have an office, but then he's offering a service. So when it comes to policies, maybe as the World Bank, what sort of advice would you have for the government in as far as trying to regulate the business that deal specifically on digital?
Not to overregulate, that would be my first response, in the sense that if you see how these businesses have been able to grow in other countries, not just the US, but in developing countries, they've actually been left alone and allowed to grow, because actually the government doesn't quite know how to regulate this kind of business. But as long as they are, doing what, they are not doing any criminal activity, they are doing proper business, and usually a lot of these young entrepreneurs, what they're doing is actually finding a solution to a problem. Like in my country, for instance, Indonesia, one of our first young entrepreneur tech startup, he found a solution for these motorcycle taxis. I saw a lot of motorcycle taxis here too. So he developed an app that can actually connect the customer to the motorcycle driver, but he used an Uber-like model where you can rate the driver and the driver can also rate the customer, and then you can link in the application, so you know who is the closest motorcycle driver to you. And then he taught there was also a standard set. You have to be dress well, you have to have safety, you have to pass the safety standards, you have to have clean helmet to provide to your rider, and so on and so forth. So that was one of the first apps. So it's solving a problem, right? And then scale also. Then they were able to scale up because there is a market, a big market. So Tanzania, I think, you have a large domestic market, and that always helps to scale up once you can figure out there's a problem to be solved. And I think what the government needs to do is just to provide the right kind of whether it's consumer protection or but not control, not over control when it's starting to grow. And this has happened in many countries actually, because the government tried to control by regulating price. Then guess who protests? The consumer. And then the government, okay, they pull back, right? Because the consumers were getting this benefit from being able to have really a quick response to get a motorcycle taxi that's nearest to them. They got good service. So, I think that's one way. And then to probably make sure that there's no illegal activity or violation of standards. I think maybe standards, having safety standards, having consumer protection standards, these are maybe the way the government can protect, make sure there's healthy growth, if you like. Yeah.
Now let's talk about COVID-19. Which I'm quite sure you're quite aware of the adverse impact that it has had not only in Africa but globally. So what are some of the lessons that the World Bank has learned as the world tries to grapple with COVID-19, and how has it shaped your approach to relief?
I think the main lesson to learn is that we could not predict that this would happen, and we cannot solve the economic issue without solving the health issue. I think that everybody kind of knows that. And what we're seeing is that the economic recovery in the world today is very uneven. And the unevenness is related to whether you can have the vaccine roll out in your country. So therefore, I think the first lesson we learned about economic recovery during this pandemic, and well, we still say during this pandemic because we are seeing Europe is now having, I don't know, 5th wave. Yeah, so the waves are still coming, and therefore we need to have the vaccine rollout, but it's not just about the vaccines. We need to continue to be, doing the health protocols. Because we don't know whether there's going to be another wave or not. So we need to learn to live and work and have economic life while managing to deal with the pandemic. And I think that's the real lesson learned from the economic recovery. And second, I think social safety net systems. So how can you give because whenever you have a lockdown, people cannot work, and especially in developing countries, that's really hard because they live day to day. They work today so they can eat today, right? So how do you give them social assistance, cash transfer that will help them? You're saving lives on the health side, but saving livelihoods, income, giving them income so they can eat. Because our data shows that people are eating less because they have no income or less income. So we need to give good income support to the people who really need it, and it has to be well targeted. I think one thing, I went today to see the TASAF in Temeke, yeah, and actually the TASAF here has worked quite well to give good support to the bottom 20% of the poorest, and it's cash transfer as well as linking it to health and education. So these are important. How to make sure that we target. Well, the other thing is that it affected more urban poor rather than rural poor, whereas the previous social protection systems were more targeting the rural area. So I think we have learned a lot about how to do better delivery of social protection. And that has to happen, otherwise the economic recovery will not happen.
So now let's look at tourism, which has been one of the most severely hit sectors. But then there's been a bit of improvement, especially here in Africa. There's somewhat of a recovery. But now, on a global context, we're seeing some countries are going back to lockdown, because of rising COVID cases. What do you think are the steps that need to be taken in order to ensure that the tourism sector is protected, so that people's livelihoods may be able to also be protected in the same line?
Yeah, I think tourism is really one difficult sector that will take some time to recover. But what can be done, first of all, is to have safe travel protocols and agreed protocols, right? So if you remember those yellow vaccine cards that we used to have. So I think what WHO is proposing is that we have a standard COVID vaccine card or QR code that can work in any country, right? Right now you have different ways of checking on the COVID vaccine in different countries. So having some uniform standard on who can safely travel, right? That's the first thing. And then start opening what we call safe corridors. So that if you fulfill the fact that you are fully vaccinated, you can travel to certain areas because they are also already fully vaccinated. You have tourism areas where the whole the workers and the population in that area are all vaccinated, so that the traveler as well as the people working there feel safe. Right, so that's what you call a safe corridor, and in Asia this is beginning to happen. Like Phuket, Bali, they create this kind of safe standards and reduce the risk for people traveling to these places. And I think a place like Tanzania, I imagine, could do the same. Because you have a large, you have ecotourism, which is in the open air, and so it's actually quite safe. You're not talking about masses of people gathering, but you need to make sure that all the people working in the tourism spot are all vaccinated, and that people coming in are also fulfilling those safety protocols. So I think that's one way to open up gradually, but to get back to the level as before will take time, I think. Yeah.
So now let's look at the massive borrowing here in Africa that has been necessitated by COVID-19. So development partners such as the World Bank have been financing different projects that aim at, mitigating the impact of COVID-19. But then recently, for example, here in Tanzania, there's been a concern of the blossoming or ballooning national debt. Does the World Bank have any concern with regards to debt sustainability? And if so, what do you think needs to be done in order to ensure that even though the country is required or forced, I would say, to borrow in order to ensure that there's a bit of, the economy keeps on moving amid COVID-19? What does the World Bank have to say about that?
Well, I think in general, we worry about the debt overhang issue. And what we are doing as a general issue is, first of all, as you know, the IMF and the World Bank have proposed the debt service suspension initiative, which is bringing you till the end of the year. But at the end of the day, the common framework is about reducing the actual debt. And there are some countries that are in that situation. But Tanzania is not in that situation. But what Tanzania needs to do is just be careful about increasing their borrowing and more importantly, how they use the funds from the borrowing as well as their fiscal funds. So the spending, how you spend the money and how you can make sure that you effectively spend the money is really, and raise also domestic revenues is really what should be the big medium-term response on the macro side for countries like Tanzania.
Okay, so let's talk about food security. Food security, because this is something that you once addressed in 2020, and COVID-19, again, it has had a bit of impact on food security, but then also climate change as well has also affected food security. So what do you say, what's your take on Africa and also the world trying to ensure that we don't reach in a state where the developing countries do not have enough food to sustain, the citizens?
If you compare today's situation to 2008, when we actually had shortage of food, today's situation is more about price. And the price of food has actually increased by about 30%. But it's not because of shortage of supply. It's because of disruption of supply chain and shipping and containers which have been disrupted because of COVID. And so the number one issue is to address these constraints on getting the goods out and in time and so on, and avoiding avoiding trade restrictions that also lead to food price increase. So that's the kind of the immediate problem. And then in the medium term, obviously you want to increase productivity and address how climate is affecting productivity in agriculture, whether it's increased drought or increased floods or not enough water. I understand that's one of the issues faced here. So then there is an issue about how do we make sure that we manage the watershed management issue to make sure that you have enough water for your agriculture, and then think about more sustainable and productive, increased productivity for agriculture. Because one of the things the young people were sharing with me last night, the one who was working on agriculture, was that there was not enough water for the smallholder farmers. So how do we solve that issue, the water issue? And that is related to building out the adaptation and resilience that you need to make sure that your rivers, your lakes, and the deforestation doesn't deplete and affect the flow of water that's coming down from your rivers and lakes. So this is that is a climate change, as well as the response is adaptation and resilience and nature-based solutions. And this is something that the World Bank is working with many countries on reaching their climate and development objectives.
Okay, so still on COVID recovery, we've seen that trade and transport in Africa as a region has been prospering quite better than the rest of the world. Now, don't you think, or do you think that the World Bank might have put in more effort on that, ensuring that the sectors that are prospering amid the global pandemic need to be given extra boost in order to ensure that they continue, doing better?
Yeah, one of our recent analysis shows that actually the cost of trade are much higher in developing countries than it is in developed countries. And there are two main factors why. It's not so much the high tariffs, but it's the high at the border, when you cross the border, costs, the customs, the complex procedures, and the other side of it is the inefficient infrastructure and logistics and ports. So what we need to do is, in the short term, we can address the streamlining of the bureaucratic procedures at the border, because that doesn't require you to build infrastructure. It requires you to better manage the process, the business process of clearing goods. And that's actually where digital technology can help, right? Make sure it's efficient. And that will do a lot to reduce the cost of trade. And then in the medium term, you do need to improve your ports, your logistics, and your transportation across, especially in Africa. A lot of that is land-based transportation. And I know that Tanzania is looking at how to build out your rail system so that you can have better transportation. And I think that is a medium-term objective that will really improve the flow of goods, and it will also help with the food prices, by the way, also. Yeah.
So you also met Madam President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Tell us what the two of you talked about, and also what's your overall impression after meeting Tanzania's first female president?
Very positive, very impressed. I think she has a clear idea about the development priorities of Tanzania, starting from human capital, the education and health issue. We talked about that. And also we talked about digital economy. So she's also very much like what we talked about earlier, the importance of getting the digital education and making sure that we can utilize digital education to give better jobs for the young people in Tanzania. And we also talk about climate change and development, because she was also in Glasgow. And of course, the requests by developing countries, which is a very fair request. If you are asking us to do more on climate change and development, we need more resources and technology. So we discussed what does climate change and development mean for Tanzania, and basically it's two. We talk about the importance of adaptation and resilience, and making sure your nature-based assets are being properly protected, restored, and used sustainably. And that's going to be one part of your climate change priority. The other one is energy access, right? So we talked about how you have hydropower, you have solar, you have wind, and then is natural gas a transition fuel or not? We had that discussion, but we recognize that for many developing countries, I mean, half of Africa is still not electrified yet. So you cannot develop without that. You can't talk about digital economy if you don't even have electricity, let alone the digital infrastructure. So that is priority too. So how do we? And then I think what we need to do, countries like Tanzania, what you need to do is, and we are really willing to support this effort. How do you design a long-term climate and development strategy that will be, and it's clear that this is the policies and the reforms and the direction that the country will go. And then the public, how much of that will come from public funding, how much of that will come from private sector, because a lot of this cannot happen without private sector. And so we talked about the importance also of the private sector coming in, whether it's in the climate change area or in the building out of infrastructure. And then finally, we talk about regional integration, regional economic integration, because Dar es Salaam port is a natural gateway for all your landlocked neighbors, right? And how the physical infrastructure, whether it's the railroad mainly, can connect with your neighboring countries like Rwanda, Burundi and DRC. But again, it's not just the physical infrastructure, but the trade facilitation. So I think we need to address both, and I think she was in general agreement with that. So I think there's the human capital issue, and then there's the creation of jobs, reducing poverty issue, and then the whole making sure you have sustainable infrastructure issue.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. That's all the time we have today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Well, you were with me, Mpoki Thompson. Continue watching Mwananchi Digital. Till next time.